Hello, everybody. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Today's topic is the future of insects in food and feed. Joining us to talk about just that is Alice Grassi, Communication Manager for the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed, and she is out of Brussels, Belgium. Welcome, Alice. Thank you for joining us. I also want to do a special shout out. You'll see some other folks here on the screen with us, and they are teachers. They're involved in the Summer Ag Institute, which is put on by the DeKalb County Farm Bureau. It's headed by Redora Collins, and they are here with us, and they're going to also be asking questions and learning about insects as a protein source. They reached out and said, we'd like some information. I said, well, let's do this and let's learn together. So here we are. We're going to do just that. A quick reminder to post your questions in the Q&A section to the right of your screen. If you're viewing over social media, feel free to post your questions there as well. So Alice, let's get started. Let's have you tell us a little bit about the International Platform of Insects for Feed and Food. What's your membership like? What role does the organization play in Europe? And I believe it has some global presence as well.
Yeah, so thank you first for inviting me, and happy to be here. So yeah, IPIFF is representing insect producers and insect manufacturers. So all those companies that transform insect proteins into what can be animal feed or human nutrition, so human food. And we also welcome universities and research centers, and as well the companies that are producing machineries for insect production. And at the moment, we are more than 80 members, mainly from Europe. But as you said, yeah, also we have members around the globe. So from the US, from Malaysia, South Korea, New Zealand, and Israel.
What about the size and scope of the overall sector when it comes to insects for feed and food? Where's that currently at, and kind of where do you see it going maybe 5 years down the road?
Yeah, so for the moment, the sector is still quite small, but it's composed mainly of SMEs. Or startups, or even companies that before they were working with biocontrol or pet food. And yeah, so basically the last few years have been quite a ride, and especially last year, 2021 was quite important for our sector on every side. So feed, food, and frass, which is the insect ejecta. And yeah, so for the moment, the sector, let's say we have a few thousand tons of EU production. Investments account around above 1 million euros, and we expect to exceed 3 billion. It was 1 billion euro, and we expect to exceed 3 billion by 2025. And yeah.
When you put out those numbers, is the majority of it in, say, feed or food? Are you seeing one sector grow more than, say, another sector, or is it fairly equal?
I would say that it's those figures are both food and feed combined for the moment, and these are results that we have asked our members 2 years ago. So it was like an internal questionnaire, and I would say that both sectors have the same potential nowadays, because we got 2 major authorizations last year, one in food and one in feed. So we see good potential in both sectors. Yeah.
So give us a general idea. I know it's probably very complex, but just kind of what does a insect farm, like a growing operation, what does it look like? How are they raised? Do you need special processing facilities? Just kind of like in a nutshell, if you would give us a sense for how it all happens.
Yeah. Sure. So I'm not a scientist, so I will try to explain you in a very simple way. On our website as well, if you have a look, there are very nice pictures in the section Media Gallery, and then you can have an idea of how it looks like from inside. But generally, it really depends on the insect species. So the majority of the species are farmed in this rectangular trays, I would say, so one on top of the other, in which there are the larvae. They eat their own substrates, so their food, which for the moment is mainly fruits, vegetables, starch products. And then at the same time, the light and temperature is checked and controlled depending on the species. And when we reach the ideal stage of the insect, which could be larvae or the adult form, for example, I would say crickets, then they are sieved from their substrate and from their frass, and so divided. And then they are transformed into and processed into animal feed, so pellets, powder, oil. The frass is kept as well for fertilizing as a fertilizing product, or they are kept as well as whole insects because those are also commercialized.
So you mentioned they can use a base of, say, vegetables and fruit and food kind of products. So can that be like restaurant waste or just food waste in general?
So for the moment, not really. For the moment, they are called former foodstuffs. At least that's the scientific name, let's say, that we give them. And former foodstuffs are food products that are not suitable for human consumption anymore, but still they're not waste. So it can be some kind of products that are not perfect to be sold in supermarkets, or maybe they are products that expire just one day after the expiration date that normally a supermarket will throw. And those kind of products can be recycled and reused as a feed for insect. That's also a big sustainability let's say advantage, because that's the food waste. It's a big issue nowadays. So
Oh, exactly. So we had a question that came in from the audience.
yeah.
What are the expected costs and ability to rear insects in a way that reduces cost?
Yeah, so normally at our organization, we don't really talk about prices because, of course, that's a market dimension. But I can say that normally the costs are more related to the building of the facility than the machineries. Then it depends on which kind of provider you use. But the substrate itself, if you can have collaborations with supermarkets or other, let's say, vegetables and fruits producers that can give you those leftovers, so to say, then you can reduce the cost a lot of transportation as well, which is important. So to find a provider that is close to you when you build your farm.
So we're going to bring on we're going to bring on Liz and Maria. They've got a question. So go ahead, ladies.
I was just wondering how many species of different insects do you raise, and can they be raised in the same facility, or are they segregated, I guess?
Yeah, so there are many species around the globe, but there are mainly 8 that are authorized in the EU. And lately we had the latest one was the silkworm, actually. And I don't think that they can be produced in the same facility because they have different characteristics, biologically speaking. So they need different temperature standards, light standards, substrate even. So then it's more optimal to separate them, let's say.
Redora.
Also to avoid contamination. Sorry.
Redora, you have a question?
Yes. What are the most common species that your members are producing? Actually, you said there are 8. Oh, can you maybe name those?
Yeah. So for feed and for food, I would say for feed, it's mainly black soldier fly, with which is like this black fly that has this head that looks like a helmet of a soldier. So that's why it's called black soldier fly. The yellow mealworm. And then for food, you have house crickets, migratory locusts, and these I would say are the most commonly farmed.
Thank you.
Do you see, is there a certain insect species or that would go more into feed than, say, on the food side? Is there a preference there?
I think that those 7 species can go mainly for both food and feed. Then, of course, depending on the taste and on the formulation of the product, some species go directly to feed. For example, the black soldier fly. But for example, you have the yellow mealworm, which is used for both food and feed. So it really depends on the formulation of the end product as well that you want to achieve as well.
Do you foresee a time when insect protein might be something that large livestock and poultry operations can utilize, or is it something that we probably can't get to that scale on?
So actually, that's a good question, because last year one of the greatest achievement was to authorize insect proteins in poultry and pig nutrition. I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, almost, I think more than 20, there was the mad cow disease, commonly in around the world, and the European Commission instituted a feed ban for animal proteins used in animal feed, and insects entered into that feed ban. But throughout the years, through a lot of advocacy activities, and as well proving that insects were already in the diet, in the natural diet of those animals, we managed to achieve the authorization of aquaculture first, so in 2017, and last year in poultry and pig nutrition. Livestock is not actually something that we foresee.
So recognizing that there's differences based on countries, what is the general regulatory environment when it comes to the inclusion of insects in food and animal feed?
Yeah, so EU legislation works like this. So basically, you have regulations which are applying directly in every EU member state legislation when they enter into force. So that's the kind of regulations that we have also for insect in feed and food. So for feed, there is this regulation approved last year on the authorization of insect proteins in poultry and pig feed, and as well as aquaculture. And then on the novel food legislation, which is the one that regulates the human nutrition, this is also another regulation that enters into force immediately in all the member states.
Do you have an idea on the US and where we are at on the regulatory side?
So I don't actually know a lot about regulation. I know it depends a lot about on the state, on each state regulation. I know that not all the animal, let's say, how can I say, not all the livestock, or for example poultry or pig or aquaculture is not all authorized. Insects are not all authorized for these species, not yet. And we actually had in April an interesting webinar and about collaborations between Europe and the North America. So then you can also check on our YouTube channel this webinar, and we talk about the differences between the US and Europe, and what can we learn from each other.
Very good. Rodora has another question.
So with your member companies, are some of them producing insects for human and animal protein, or do they tend to just focus on one or the other?
I would say that the majority is focusing on food or feed, but there are some companies that are doing both. Because maybe first they started as feed, but then they saw the potential as well for food. So they also have this trajectory. And normally they produce not the end product, but just the insect per se. And then they sell that product to other companies that transform it and create food products.
So like house crickets and cricket flour?
Yes, some of them, they do everything with their own company. Some others, they just rear the insects, let's say transform them, and then they sell proteins or the extracts to other companies that create, I don't know, pasta, bars, crackers, and so on.
So we're going to bring on, Chris has a question.
Yeah, so I can't speak of cultures from around the world, but I know that there's plenty of other cultures that are quite comfortable with eating insects as part of their normal diet. And I think like our Western culture would be okay with allowing or with having insects as feed, but how do we overcome and what barriers do you see there being in the food aspect of insects in the Western culture?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. That's actually a very nice question. Indeed, it depends on the region and on the part of the world you're from, because, for example, in Asia, insects are in their diet have been there for many years, and it's a traditional food. While in the West, yes, indeed, there are some people that maybe are used to have tried them, some others that maybe don't want to try them. But what we actually try to communicate to people is that we should give a choice to consumers. So not to force anyone to eat if they don't want to try them, but to give a choice, to make them available on the market, to propose the advantages, so environmental advantages, nutritional advantages, and tell them, look, you can have a choice. You maybe can have insects once a week. You can incorporate them in meals that maybe are more familiar to you. So, for example, a plate of pasta, or some crackers, or protein bars, or burgers as well. So then you don't actually see the insect, but then you can see something familiar, and then makes you want to try.
So we have a question coming in from the audience. Insects as a protein source would be a secondary protein source in the diet. Like, so you'd have like soybean meal and you could supplement it with, say, insect protein. Is that kind of how it might feed into more on the animal side of things?
So the animal side, they can also, I would say in this case, they can also complement the bigger picture of complementary sources of proteins, because the word alternative always gives me a bit of separation idea. Alternative is or this or that. Mm-hmm. So if it's complementary, then I feel that it's better perceived as well from the public. So also in feed, I think that can be complementary and complement other kinds of feed.
What about another question, what about do you know the crude protein content of insects, and does it vary by species? That might be getting a little technical, but
yeah, no problem. So they should have almost 80% of proteins. They're not only proteins; they also contain fibers, vitamins, amino acids that are useful for both animals and humans. And yeah, of course, it might depend on the species, but normally something that it's nice with insects is also that you eat them all, so that you don't really waste parts of the insects like you would do maybe with other foods.
Are there any particular risks when it comes to, say, humans consuming insects, or even animals consuming insects? Anything that we need to kind of be aware of or watch out for?
So I mentioned before the process of novel food. So that's the process of, let's say, authorizing a food product that wasn't on the market before. And for that, we have EFSA, which is our European Food Safety Authority. And they are the ones that are commissioned to do a first check on the application from insect producers. And they actually check all the safety issues, or anything that matters with safety. And we received so far 4 authorizations, therefore 4 opinions, and they were all positive. So they are considered safe for human consumption. Of course, one maybe something that was raised was something about allergenicity, but I think that that's also in any other food product, it's important that consumers know maybe I can be allergic to this, I can be allergic to that. Insects look very much like crustaceans, so that might be some kind of similarities with the allergenicity of crustaceans. So that's the only thing I would say.
Interesting. Okay. What about, you mentioned environmental sustainability in terms of the industry itself. Can you compare that to, say, other industries or other ways of producing protein? Have you taken a look at those kinds of comparisons?
Not yet, I would say. We are working on building this life cycle assessment of products. So to find some kind of environmental, how can I say, some kind of benchmark and standards on environment. But insect farming, I can say that it uses less arable land, because, as I mentioned before, they are farmed in these trays, so one on top of the other, so then you need less space. And the facility as well needs less space. and they need as well less water because depending on the species of the insect, but they can absorb the water directly from the food, so from the fruits, from the vegetables. And as well, it's important to underline that they can be fed with this former foodstuffs, so with this food that is not yet waste, and they can be recycled in their feed.
We have a question coming in from our social media audience. Andy, you want to put that up? There we go. We always seem to talk about feeding insects in terms of protein, but they're not high. Are they not high in fat content as well? So what can you say about the fatty acid profile of insects?
So yeah, they have fatty acids, but they are those kind of fatty acids. There are the good fats in food products, because there are, I don't know the scientific name, but there are fatty acids that are good for humans, of course, with limitations like in any other food product, I would say.
So you mentioned you're looking at doing, kind of benchmarking from a sustainability standpoint. I'm guessing there's also work to be done in terms of just overall research when it comes to insects as a protein source. Is this something that's being done at the industry level, at the university level, kind of a combination of both? Just kind of give us a scope of what's being done out there.
Yeah, so of course, research is important for a small sector. We have both universities and research centers, and as well research departments of many of our members that are helping us with the research at this stage. We also have published a paper, a brochure about research priorities in the upcoming years, and that will help as well both insect producers and, in our case, European Union institutions to know where are we going and what's our final goal and what we need to upscale the sector.
Very good. So I just want to encourage everybody to post any questions you have as we look to start wrapping up here today. Anything else that we need to be talking about, Alice? So there are some things that we haven't touched on that you'd like to touch on?
Maybe I would like to say that even though the sector is still smaller than others, I have met many people and many workers that really believed in this project, that maybe had a crazy idea at first when they started to farm insects. But I would say that thanks to the latest regulatory developments, the sector has really a good potential to go and to go bigger. And I'm happy that consumers slowly, but also European institutions are recognizing this potential and this hard work and investments as well.
Well, and we've got a couple of facilities here going up in the U.S., I believe. Is that,
yeah.
Can you give us any insight on those?
Yeah, I know that there are some of our members that decided to open facilities in the US. I don't know very much about the details, but I think that they saw a good opportunity as well to export good practices in the US. And also, I mean, I know from our American members as well that we can also learn from each other for sure when it comes to that.
And those are growing facilities, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think they're about to be built, yeah.
Yeah. So we have a question here. What's the most common processing technique when feeding insects? Is it whole insects? Is it the grinding for powder? Is there one that's more common? I mean, we talked a little bit about consumer acceptance on, various types of products, but can you give us some insight from the processing side?
Yes, so from the processing side, I would say that it's a bit of both. So mainly for feed, I think that the powder that comes from the insects goes into a processor that process them together with other ingredients into pellets, for example, for pet food, and as well for aquaculture. And then depending on the EU member states, that depends. It's not really the same everywhere, but for whole insects depends on each member state legislation.
Another audience question, Rodora, you want to take that?
Yes, Alice, as educators, we're always, I think we're always curious about people's backgrounds and what was the route or educational route that led you to where you are in your career right now?
Yeah, so I've studied political science and European Union studies, so I thought that Brussels was, of course, one of the next stops, if not the stop. And I worked as well in communication, so combining communication and as well food safety, because one of my summer jobs was working in a factory for tomato production. So I have put together communication and food safety, and I saw this sector as quite very interesting, and I got very into it. And I'm trying to let people know about the sector and also to show with visuals, because that's actually something that people need nowadays. Because words can count, but if you don't see it with your own eyes, you still don't believe it. So I think that's a nice challenge.
And we have another question. Is there research in going on in terms of the feeding of black soldier flies in ruminants, for ruminants?
I might say I don't actually know in that, because
Okay.
ruminant feed is not really something that we are focusing on at the moment. So I'm afraid I cannot reply.
Because it's mostly pet food, right?
I guess, yes, but ruminants is also another thing. So it's a bit different. So,
But I mean,
don't know.
where you're focusing right now is mostly pets.
It's pet food, aquaculture, poultry, and feed,
Okay.
and pigs. Sorry.
Okay. So you are in
Yeah.
the main species as well. So very good. Any other, Andy, let's bring on our teachers here again. See if anybody else has any final questions. All right. If not, I want to go
I
ahead.
have one more. Alice, what is your favorite insect if you consume them as food?
Then it's actually asking me what's your favorite child.
Oh, okay.
No, but I cannot really have a preference, because it's still growing. But for the moment, I would say that between yellow mealworms and house crickets, which are the ones authorized, and locusts. So I would say the three of them.
Okay. We will have a chance here to sample crickets tomorrow. So
Okay,
Yep,
nice.
I was just going to say, I thought you had some samples coming for tomorrow. That's great. So Alice Grassi, Communication Manager for the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to the DeKalb County Farm Bureau and all of you teachers for your great questions and helping me co-host today's program. Tomorrow on Feedstuffs 365, we're going to explore how animal agriculture can step up its game when it comes to attracting investor dollars. We'll hear how being innovative and creative in approaching solutions can play a role in helping drive that. Then on Thursday, we hear from a company that's moving towards the commercialization of animal vaccines that are made from corn. On Friday, we wrap up with a discussion of the supply chain and what McDonald's looks for from its protein supply partners. So a lot of stuff going on this week. Check feedstuffs365.com and tune in to see all of those. They will be at our regular scheduled time of 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. Until then, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.